Have you ever heard of someone who builds something they absolutely hate? Well, that's the story we're getting into today. We're talking about a guy who built one of the greatest empires in history while despising the very idea of an empire. This is the incredible story of Ecuon. Seriously, just think about that for a second. What if the most powerful person in the world didn't even want the job? That one question, man, it's the key to everything about him. It's a story that's going to make you rethink what it means to be a leader, what power is, and what kind of legacy you leave behind. All right, so before we can really get Ecuon, we have to get the world he came from. And let me tell you, this place was no fairy tale. Forget progress, forget enlightenment. This world was just a relentless, brutal meat grinder. See, Ecuon had this gift, or maybe it was a curse. He had an unnaturally long life. So for him, history wasn't something you read in a book. He was there. He lived it. And what he saw wasn't humanity getting better over time. Nope. It was just the same nightmare, over and over and over again. A brutal, endless loop. And this timeline here really lays it all out. It's just brutal. First, you've got the Rashuna Empire, conquering everything in sight. Then, boom, they get overthrown by the Vistobi. And you think, okay, maybe things will get better, but no, they were even worse. And then they get overthrown by the Rokarans, who turn out to be the biggest tyrants the world had ever seen. The names on the flag kept changing, sure, but for the average person, the suffering never stopped. And the Rokarans, that was the breaking point for Ecuon. Because here's the kicker, he'd actually helped them. He thought these are the guys who are finally going to break the cycle. But when they got power, they turned into the same old monsters. He was just disgusted, done. He walked away from it all, his life, his status, everything, and just started wandering. He had to believe there was a better way to live somewhere. And that's what's so cool about this story. His long journey didn't lead him to find a better way. It led him to build one from the ground up. This, right here, is where things really start to get interesting. So after who knows how long, his travels bring him to this continent, Tritoni, and a little town called Iris. And it's here, in this amazing place, that he finally stops wandering and starts building. He starts putting together a totally new kind of society, one that wasn't built on who could swing the biggest sword, but on a shared idea. He called it sanctuary. And this definition here really nails it. It wasn't just a city, it was this radical new idea. It was a safe harbor from all that cruelty he'd seen his whole life. And the reason it worked is because it was the polar opposite of an empire. It didn't demand you kneel. It offered you freedom. It didn't run on fear. It ran on kindness and people actually helping each other. A promise that you weren't alone. I mean, for that world, that was absolutely revolutionary. And this quote from him, wow. It just says it all, doesn't it? Life isn't fair, but that's our challenge, not our excuse. He wasn't trying to pretend the world was a tough place. He was saying that's exactly why we have to choose to be better. It's a total call to action. But you know how these things go. You can't build a paradise right next door to a monster's lair and not expect them to notice. That cruel cycle Ecuon thought he'd escaped? Yeah, it was about to come knocking on his door, real loud. And word got out, of course. It spread like wildfire. People suffering under the Rokaran Empire started pouring into Tritoni, looking for that sanctuary Ecuon had built. The little town of Iris grew into this incredible city, Irisol. It was this shining example of a better way. But to the Rokar, a bright light like that just shows them what to aim at. It was a threat, and it had to be snuffed out. And really, it all boiled down to this. You had two completely opposite ways of seeing the world. Irisol was all about kindness, freedom, helping each other out. Roskar was about one thing and one thing only: power, dominance, conquest. These two ideas couldn't exist in the same world. There was no way to compromise. A fight was absolutely coming. And sure enough, Rokar launched a massive invasion. Their goal wasn't just to punish Irisol. It was to wipe it off the map and take the whole continent. And this is the ultimate irony of Ecuon's life. To save his sanctuary, to protect this place built on freedom, he had to do the one thing he hated most. He had to build an empire of his own. So this war kicks off, and it becomes one of the biggest, most legendary conflicts in history. Because this wasn't just about territory anymore. This was a war over what kind of world they were all going to live in. It was a fight for the future. And when I say long, I mean long. Over 200 years. Think about that. Whole generations of people were born, grew up, and died, and the only world they ever knew was one at war with J.R.R. And through it all, there was Ecuon, leading the fight year after year, decade after decade. The end, when it finally came, was dramatic. The J.R.R. leaders, the high clerics, were terrified of this immortal general they could never seem to beat, so they set a trap, a final, desperate attempt to kill him once and for all. But it didn't work. They threw everything they had at him, and he survived. And Ecuon, enraged by this final betrayal, just unleashed. He completely destroyed them. And with the leadership gone, the entire exhausted J.R.R. empire just fell apart. Just like that, the endless cycle was finally, truly broken. But winning the war didn't solve Equion's biggest problem. In fact, it created it. He'd saved everyone. He'd won. But in the process, he'd become the very thing he set out to destroy. He was a scribe, a general, a savior, and now he was an emperor, the one title he never wanted. So he took the throne, but he did it his way. He wasn't a dictator. He was a teacher. His entire goal as emperor wasn't to hold on to power, but to teach his people how to live without him, to basically make his own job unnecessary. And he did this for centuries, patiently ruling, guiding, making sure that idea of sanctuary wasn't just a law, but was woven into the very fabric of their culture. He wanted to make sure it would last long after he was gone. And then one day, he just disappeared. No big farewell, no dramatic death. He just decided his job was done, got up from the throne, and walked away. No one ever knew where he went. And his legacy, it's just incredible. He didn't leave behind a son or a daughter to take his place. He left behind an empty throne, a symbol. It's staying vacant, in his honor. Instead, they had rulers called ographobes who governed in his place, kind of like caretakers. And this belief persisted through the entire empire, this hope that one day Ecuon would come back. Which brings us to the big, lingering question, right? He didn't leave a dynasty. He left behind an idea. So, can that work? In a world that's always full of ambition and people hungry for power, can an idea alone, no matter how good it is, really be enough to hold an entire empire together forever?